So all the way from Stanford, give it up real big for Marc Jacobson, everybody.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Marc Jacobson. I work at Stanford University, and I develop energy plans for countries and states and cities and towns to transition to entirely clean, renewable energy, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. So, in fact, we're going to, well, what are the reasons we look at these plans, we develop these plans? Well, there are three reasons in my mind. One is air pollution, which causes on the order of 7.5 million premature deaths every year worldwide. Global warming, of course, is a growing problem and will eventually surpass air pollution as the leading cost, environmental cost in the world. And then energy insecurity is a third major problem facing the world today, and there are many types of energy insecurities. There's the economic, social, and political instability due to the fact that fossil fuels are limited resources and they will run out at some point. There's the fact that we have a lot of centralized power plants and refineries that if one of them goes down, that takes down part of a city or a huge portion of supply of energy. There's also the fact that when you have fossil fuels, you have to continuously mine, refine, and process and transport them. There are 50,000 new oil and gas wells drilled every year in central North America alone. And when we have renewable energy, the wind comes right to a turbine, solar comes right to a panel. We don't have to mine for fuels. So there's an energy insecurity of having to not only mine for the fuels, but import them a lot of times. And there can be supply disruptions that can stop them, including war or strikes or a lot of different reasons. And then finally, there's environmental and health degradation due to fossil fuel mining and waste, as well as the pollution from it. So these are all drastic problems that require immediate and drastic solutions. So we've been developing energy plans for the last 16 years now to transition countries and states, as I mentioned, and cities and towns. And they involve electrifying most everything and then providing the electricity from clean renewable sources, namely wind and water and solar power. So if you think of energy as four major sectors, there's electricity, transportation, buildings, and industry. For transportation, we'd go to battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles. For buildings, we'd go to electric heat pumps, electric induction cooktops, and the heat pumps would be for air heating, water heating, air conditioning, clothes drying even. We'd use energy efficiency measures, insulation, LED lights. We basically get rid of combustion, use more efficient appliances and machines. For industry, we'd electrify that with most industrial energy is used for high temperatures, and so we have electric technologies to do that. There are electric arc furnaces, induction furnaces, resistance furnaces, dielectric heaters, electron beam heaters. And we would power all this electricity from just onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics on rooftops and in power plants, concentrated solar power, some geothermal electricity, hydroelectricity, some tidal and wave electricity, and some geothermal and solar direct heat for certain applications. Now, of course, the sun doesn't always shine, the wind doesn't always blow, so we need storage. But it's not only storage for electricity, we also need some heat storage, cold storage, and hydrogen storage. So there are many existing types of electricity storage options already, concentrated solar power with storage. Of course, conventional hydroelectric dams is the largest type of storage in the world, followed by pumped hydroelectric storage. Batteries are growing and are probably the third largest storage at this point. But there's also flywheels, compressed air storage, gravitational storage, and using some hydrogen that's stored for grid electricity production through fuel cells. For heating and cooling, the most common types of storage are hot and cold water tanks. But then there's ice storage for buildings. And also not only buildings, but stadiums or hospitals. There's also storage in building materials and district heating and cooling. There's storage in the soil, in aquifers, and also in what are called water pits. So these are all existing technologies. And industrial storage, there's a new technology called fire bricks, which is basically kiln bricks in different compositions that you can heat up to about 2,000 degrees Celsius from intermittent wind and solar. And you can store that heat for days to weeks and then run air through channels in the bricks to heat up the air. Then the air goes straight to melt a metal or to boil water or do something else. And the nice thing about these fire bricks, well, they're dirt cheap. They're made of dirt, basically. But they cost 1/10 the cost of batteries per kilowatt hour of energy stored. And they can actually replace 90% of furnaces for industry. You can get rid of all the furnaces, including the electric furnaces, by just using fire bricks combined with wind and solar because they have resistance heating elements inside the bricks to heat them up. Anyway, this is a new technology that's commercialized already. Oh, and I mentioned hydrogen. We'll use hydrogen for limited applications. Not everything. We only want to use them for long-distance aircraft and ships, maybe some long-distance trucks and trains, but not passenger vehicles. They can be clean if the hydrogen is green hydrogen from wind, water, and solar, but it takes 3 times the number of wind turbines to run a hydrogen fuel cell electric passenger vehicle as an electric battery electric vehicle. But the tables turn for long-distance heavy transport. That's where hydrogen becomes advantageous. Hydrogen is also useful for steel production, ammonia production, and as I mentioned, some grid electricity storage. It is not useful for heating homes. We don't want to mix it with gas, send it through pipelines. For heating homes, you still burn it and create pollution. We don't need it to burn it for heat for industry. And as I said, we don't need it for passenger vehicles. So next, let's look at transitioning individual buildings. I just want to give an example of this in my own home. I was fortunate to be able to build in 2017. And it's all electric, no gas. It runs amazingly well. It has solar on the roof, it has batteries in the garage, electric cars, and electric heat pumps. These are called ductless mini-split heat pumps for air heating, air conditioning, and also for water heating. Nice thing about heat pumps, they use 1/4 the energy as gas heaters to provide the same heat, but they just move heat. The reason is they move heat. Combustion heating, you're creating heat. With heat pumps, you're just moving it around. So it uses 1/4 the energy, and so very little electricity is needed. This is a heat pump water heater. You don't need any gas for it. You just plug it in. And it uses 1/4 the energy as a gas heater, provides perfectly hot water, and very little energy. For cooking, electric induction cooktop, it uses 60% less energy as gas. It boils water in half the time as gas. It cooks evenly, works perfectly fine. 8 years of energy use have generated 120% of all my home and vehicle energy use. I've had no electric bill, no gas bill or gasoline bill in 8 years, and received an average of $860 a year for the first 5 years from my community choice aggregation utility, which is called Silicon Valley Clean Energy. Although they changed the rates 3 years ago, now it's only about $250 a year. But they do take the extra energy. But the thing you save when you have a new home, when you start a new home, it's not the same if you're retrofitting a home, but if you do not put gas, there's no reason to put both gas and electricity in your home. Electricity does everything that gas does, but better and cheaper and more efficiently. So I saved, these are ranges what average, different homes would save, but in my case, I saved about $6,000 in a gas hookup fee. The utility wanted to charge $6,000 just to hook up gas to the property. Avoided another $10,000 in gas pipes. You don't need gas pipes if you have an all-electric home, but these are ranges for other ranges of homes. No electric bill, gas bill, or gasoline bills. So you save quite a bit of money up front, and annually you also save. So the battery and solar system paid itself off after 5 years with subsidies, but without subsidies it'd be 7 years or so, or till 7 to 10 years actually. And it works perfectly fine. Nothing breaks down, or very little maintenance for the system. So any chance you have, all regulations and laws, we should only have all electric homes now with solar batteries, electric heat pumps, induction cooktops, energy efficiency, insulation, etc. Well, okay, so I'm going to jump up to the global scale. Can we transition the entire world to clean, renewable energy? We developed roadmaps for 150 countries. And this is some interesting statistics. In 2022, the end-use power demand among all these countries for all energy purposes, it's electricity, transportation, buildings, industry, but also agriculture, forestry, fishing, military, is about 13.3 trillion watts or terawatts. In 2050, that's expected to go up to about 19.6 terawatts. But if we electrify all energy and provide the electricity with just wind and water and solar, that goes down about 54% to about 9 terawatts for 5 major reasons. The efficiency of battery electric and hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles over internal combustion engine vehicles, that's about a 20% reduction. About 4% reduction due to electrifying industry. Another 13% due to the efficiency of heat pumps over combustion heating. And then about 11% of all energy worldwide is used to mine, transport, and refine fossil fuels and uranium. You don't need that in a wind, water, solar world because, as I said, all wind comes to a turbine, all solar comes to the panel. We don't need to mine fuels. We're wasting 11% of all our energy worldwide just to mine fuels and building millions and millions of wells and pipelines. And then another 7% due to energy efficiency improvements beyond business as usual. So graphically, it kind of looks like this. This is year along the horizontal axis from 2023 to 2050. If we don't do anything, we increase our energy requirements along the top line. If we electrify, provide the electricity with wind, water, solar, we go down the 5 shades of colors to the 100% WWS line at about 9 terawatts. And then we provide that electricity, the 9 terawatts, with just onshore and offshore wind, solar photovoltaics, et cetera. And this shows an 80% transition by 2030 and 100% by 2050. However, if we can get 80% by 2030, we should be able to get 100% by 2035, and that's what this shows. In fact, we have 97% of all the technologies we need to do this. It's just a question of deploying as fast as possible. So let's just look. There's more kind of details of what that wind, water, solar mix would look like in the world average and for the US, and we did this, as I mentioned, for 150 countries, so we have different plans for each country. So it's mostly going to be wind and solar, over 90% wind plus solar, so a combination of onshore and offshore wind, rooftop PV, utility PV, some small amount of concentrated solar, but some geothermal electricity, hydroelectricity. All of the hydroelectricity here is existing. We're not adding hydro here. It's just existing hydro. And what about keeping the grid stable? The wind doesn't always blow, the sun doesn't always shine. So we developed not only plans for the countries, but we did grid stability analyses for all countries, combining them into 29 world regions. And we also did separate studies for each of the 50 US states and combined states into different regions. So this is for the WECC, which is the Western Interconnect, and which Colorado is part of. And it just shows we were able to keep the grid stable with just wind, solar, geothermal, and hydro in Colorado and the other western states. No nuclear, no biomass, no fossil fuels at all. And we keep the grid stable for multiple years, every 30 seconds. So these are just simulations showing that. I'm not going to go into details due to lack of time, but we can keep the grid stable everywhere. There's nowhere in the world we cannot keep the grid stable with just wind, water, solar, and storage, using what's called demand response and interconnecting geographically dispersed renewables. How much does it cost to keep the grid stable? This is what I call the Green New Deal cost of an energy transition. So worldwide, it's about $60 trillion. In the US, about $6.5 trillion. China's $15.5. Europe's about $5.4. Colorado's less than $100 billion for a 100% energy transition, eliminating all emissions associated with climate, all emissions associated with air pollution, all emissions, and providing energy security for everybody, for generations to come. So what's more important, though, is the annual energy cost, and this is really what's key. The annual energy cost today worldwide of fossil fuels and uranium and everything else is about $11 trillion per year, and that's expected to go up to about $18 trillion per year. But in Colorado, we estimate about $36 billion per year in 2050 is what Colorado will spend on energy in a business as usual case. and another $9.6 billion per year on health costs due to air pollution, and another $61 billion due to climate costs to the rest of the world due to Colorado emissions. So the social cost is about $100+ billion per year. But if we go to wind, water, solar for all energy sectors, we eliminate the health and climate costs associated with energy entirely. Our energy requirements go down on the order of 60% in Colorado, and our energy cost goes down 68%, from $35.7 billion per year to $11.5 billion per year. And that's mostly, as I mentioned, because of the reduced energy use due to the efficiency of electricity over combustion. The rest is due to the lower cost per unit energy. But it's about then saving about $24 billion per year in energy costs, and on the order of $95 billion per year in energy plus health plus climate costs. Well, if the original capital cost was $100 billion per total for Colorado, and you're saving $25 billion per year, that's a 4-year payback time. So it's a 4-year payback time to transition the entire state of Colorado, just in terms of energy cost alone, ignoring health and climate costs. If you count for health and climate costs, it's less than a 1-year payback time. So it's a no-brainer in terms of just cost, whether you think of it as energy costs or climate costs. Now, the world average cost per unit energy of renewables is now less than fossil fuels for pretty much all renewables. This is from IRENA, and this is a weighted average worldwide. Fossil fuels are about $100 per megawatt hour. Utility PV is $44. Wind, onshore wind is $33. Even offshore wind is $75 a megawatt hour, cheaper than fossil fuels in the world average. Geothermal, $71. Hydro is $57. What about land? Well, we don't need new land for offshore wind or tidal or wave power or rooftop PV. Our solar, rooftop solar does not take up new land. And we're only adding a small amount of geothermal, doesn't take up much land. So the only land we need really is for utility PV and onshore wind. And even that onshore wind is just space between wind turbines that can be used for ranching or farmland or open space or even putting solar on. Worldwide, these plans take up about 0.57 of the world's land area to transition the entire world. In the US, it's about 1.05%. In Colorado, it's about 0.43% to transition all of Colorado. For perspective, about 1.24% of all US land right now is used just to grow corn for corn ethanol to supply only 4% of transportation energy. And another 1.3% of US land is occupied by the fossil fuel industry for the 5 million oil and gas wells, 4 million of them are abandoned. Another several millions of kilometers of pipelines, hundreds of thousands of gas stations, storage facilities, processing facilities, you name it. The huge amount of US is taken up by the fossil fuel industry. As I mentioned, we need 50,000 oil and gas wells, new ones every year in central North America alone. So 2.4 to 2.5% of US land is already occupied for energy. We would use less of that in a clean renewable energy world. Now, what is interesting, what's happening so far in the world? There are already 14 countries that generate 95 to 100% of their electricity. Electricity is only about 20% of the end-use energy, but it's still good. 14 countries generate 95 to 100% of their electricity from wind, water, and solar. They're dominated by hydropower for the most part. In the United States, there are actually 11 states that provide 52 to 120% of their electricity demand from just wind, water, solar. And you wouldn't believe South Dakota is on top. It's provided in the last 4 quarters, at least quarter 3, 24 to quarter 2, 25. So full year, it provided 120% of its demand of electricity with just wind, hydro, and solar, with 88% wind, about 30% hydro, and the rest solar. It also produced about 10% coal and 10% gas, so about 140% total of demand was met with all energy and exported the difference. The point is it can supply 100% of its demand from wind, water, solar. Montana was at 95.3% wind, water, solar with mostly hydro and wind. Iowa was 78% wind, water, solar with almost all wind. 7 of the 11 states that are leading are dominated by wind. And in fact, and I'll show you where this is really interesting. If you can see it, it's of those 11 states that are leading, 10 of them have electricity prices at least 2 cents a kilowatt hour below the US average. Only Maine has a high electricity price. Colorado's on this list too. You can kind of see it on the left. It's below the US average, and it also has more than 40% of its electricity demand is met from wind, water, solar in the last 4 quarters. So the key is that the more renewables you have, the lower your electricity price. People always point to California as the exception because California's, first of all, is not in the top 11, they're number 12, just around close to 50% wind, water, solar, and they're really high prices, but it has nothing to do with the renewables. The renewables are keeping the prices lower than they would. It has to do with all the wildfires caused by transmission line sparks, where the cost of these billions of dollars for the last 6 years of fires have been passed on to customers. The Aliso Canyon and San Bruno gas disasters, where the costs were passed on to customers. Because of San Bruno, all the gas lines underground had to be strengthened. That was passed on to customers. All the transmission lines are now being undergrounded. That's being passed on to customers. We're keeping the Diablo Canyon nuclear plant open. That cost, it's all subsidized and it's being passed on to customers. And we have to strengthen all the transmission distribution lines that are all aged, and that cost is being passed on to customers. So there are a lot of reasons we have high prices in California, nothing to do with renewables. Okay, this is really interesting. So we looked at these 150 countries that we developed plans for, and then we looked at how fast they're growing their wind, water, solar. And then we projected based on that, when will they get to 100% wind, water, solar across all energy sectors? And the interesting thing here is, well, the US is actually, at their current trajectory, will not get there until 2155. So that's like 130 years from now. China, on the other hand, will get there by 2045, in 20 years. This is what is fascinating, and I'm going to show you some details of this. There are actually 5 countries that are going to be faster than China if they keep going at their current pace. Now, this can change each year, just depending on how much renewables are grown. But just to give you an idea of how fast China is growing their electricity, their energy. This is for, again, all energy. This is the blue bar is the 2050. What's the end-use energy needed in 2050 if we electrified all energy in that country and provide the electricity with just wind, water, solar? So that's what we need. The other colors, the red, the orange, and the green, are what has been installed already in 2023, 24, and 25, respectively. And so the interesting thing is China has installed its green for 2025, so much renewables, it actually has already met 56% of what the United States needs in 2050 to go to 100% renewables across all energy sectors. If you look at that dashed line, that crosses what the US needs, that's 56%. And China's already installed that. It's put, in the first 6 months of this year, that's 280 gigawatts of renewables, wind, water, and solar, mostly solar than wind and some hydro. It's 280 gigawatts, so that would be a year, 560 gigawatts. That's more peak power than all the nuclear reactors in the world combined built over the last 60, 70 years, which is around 400 or so gigawatts. I mean, that's just an enormous pace at which they're growing. So if you actually look at the trajectory, this is the trajectory of China versus the United States. China's trajectory at eliminating all energy emissions, greenhouse gas emissions, and air pollutants it's going to meet it by 2045. It'll get rid of everything by 2045 if it keeps up this same pace and if it electrifies everything, which is a big if. I'm not saying this will happen, but it's definitely possible. And the point is, other countries can do this if we just put our mind to it. It's definitely possible. And as I showed, many states have done quite a bit. Okay, so now I want to come to California. This is the last interesting thing. So California's, so far this year, there have been 191 days that the electricity supply has been wind, water, solar, met more than 100% of demand for part of the day. 191 days this year in 2025. It's like 70%, close to 70% of the days. So this is an example of what I'm talking about. So the red on the left panel, the red line is the 100% of demand of electricity on California's main grid. And the colors are, well, the yellow is solar, the green is wind, then there's the kind of orange is geothermal, the light blue is hydro, and the dark blue are batteries. And so you can see for a few hours on this particular day, we met 100% of demand with wind, water, solar. On the right is the actual demand and the actual supplies, and so they're consistent with each other. But on this particular day, there were 10.9 gigawatts peak batteries on the grid. Now we're up to 11.2 peak gigawatts of peak batteries. To put that in perspective, the average power demand on California's main grid is 24 gigawatts. So they're meeting over close to the batteries put on the grid, and these are almost all put on in the last 2 years. The batteries meet over 45% of the average demands for at least 4 hours. They're 4-hour batteries. And in fact, on Sunday was a new record of peak discharge rate. California, we had like 47 gigawatt hours of batteries discharged onto the grid. That's 9.2% of all the energy during the day was provided by batteries, just to give you an idea of how fast batteries have grown. And so there's no excuse everywhere not to just use batteries to balance wind and solar. It's done now quite a bit. Now, this is what's really fascinating. So there's a lot of stuff here, and I'll just read it because I'm sure you can't read it from there. But the left column is the demand for electricity. So the demand for electricity on California's grid is now, it's 1.7% less. Well, this was 1.4% less as of this day, but now as of yesterday, it was 1.7% less than last year. So all this additional AI, California has the third most data centers in the US, by far the most electric vehicles, and yet the demand for electricity has gone down. And why is that? Well, it's because of all the rooftop solar that's been added. When you add rooftop solar, you reduce the demand for grid electricity. And so even though demand for grid electricity is going up, people are putting up a lot of rooftop solar, and people use that rooftop solar electricity first before they use the grid electricity. And so a lot of rooftop solar will decrease demand for electricity. And you can see that in this curve on the right, where you can see in the middle of the day, there's a dip in the demand for electricity. That's because of all the rooftop solar. So there's a little less demand. Wind, water, solar has been going up each year. From these statistics, solar is up 16% since last year and about 45% in the last 2 years. The utility scale solar is. Batteries are up 58% in the last 1 year and 206% in the last 2 years. Fossil gas is down 17.4%, actually 18% as of yesterday, 18% in the last year and about 37% in the last 2 years. So we've had an increase of solar, increase of batteries, dropping in gas. So we're replacing gas with solar and batteries in California. Okay, what can be done to get 100% wind, water, solar the rest of the hours of the year? Well, more utility PV and batteries, more rooftop PV and batteries, heat pumps, energy efficient buildings to reduce demand, offshore wind, which we have a huge resource. In fact, anywhere in the US which has a coastline has really good offshore wind resource. Enhanced geothermal, which is a new thing. It's now commercial. You can dig deeper and get hot temperatures to produce electricity pretty much anywhere in the US now. Shifting more hydropower to night and using demand response more effectively. So just to summarize, worldwide, we didn't talk about jobs, but we did look at jobs in every country and every state. We'd create far more jobs than we'd lose. 28 million more worldwide if we transition. About 17,500 we calculate in Colorado. Require only a small amount of land for footprint and spacing areas. For a transition, we'd avoid millions of air pollution deaths worldwide. Slow then reverse global warming. We can keep the grid stable, we think, with a transition to clean renewable energy. Annual energy costs are about 61% lower than with fossil fuels on a worldwide scale, and social costs are about 92% lower. So why wouldn't we do this? There is really no reason not to. And if you're interested in more information, all our plans are at this website, on the second website. You can just download them. There's infographics that are in the last link. You can look at a map and click on a state or a country to find an energy plan. And anyway, I'm happy to answer questions. Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent. All right, Mark, let's take a seat here. We got a couple of runners in the audience with microphones. If you got questions for Mark, I know a lot of you are still processing and digesting, but if you got some quick questions, fire them off. Mark is going to try to rapid fire answer these. We got about 6.5 minutes, so let's do it. I see somebody over there. Yeah, let's do it.
Hi. Thank you, Mark. My name's Jess. I work for an environmental nonprofit here in Summit County, and I'm a resident of Breckenridge. And I'm curious, since I'm a Coloradan, $98 billion to transition Colorado to 100% wind, water, solar, I guess, production and use. What assumptions are built into your model about incentives? I'm asking this because the price to install a mini split heat pump here in our community is about $20,000 to $40,000 depending on home size, and it's a big burden for people. And so we have found in our work that we really need to help folks install them, and I'm curious what your models are showing.
Okay.
Can I just say, it is almost impossible to hear questions from the stage because of the way the speakers are. Did you get all that?
I got little bits of it about how can Colorado transition?
I think the fix is to just have people shout out the questions. But yeah, why don't you tee off it as best you can?
Well, from my understanding, the question is how can people afford to transition? Well, first of all, it does take effort at not only the individual level, but at the community level and the state government level, and hopefully the federal level as well. So it involves everybody taking part, and certainly subsidies help. But one of the things is there is a upfront cost, certainly for a transition of an individual building, but it definitely pays itself off. This is what is the key, and there are options to lease solar, for example, rather than purchase it up front, and to lease batteries. But there are still subsidies available for a limited time at the federal level, and hopefully states will kick in subsidies just to encourage people to do this. But the benefits are so great in terms of cost savings, and all these things, electric cars, electric heat pumps, electric induction cooktops, energy efficiency improvements, that's the lowest hanging fruit. If you want to start with the lowest hanging fruit, go to energy efficiency improvements, weatherizing your home, which there are subsidies there through the Inflation Reduction Act. There are over 1.5 million people in the US have weatherized their homes using subsidies from the Inflation Reduction Act. And so I would just go through each of the things you can do and see what you can afford. That's how to start. But you need definitely incentives, help from state and local governments as well as the federal government.
Nice. And I really, truly, I think just try to scream it out, because the way we've unsynced the speakers, it's like how they torture people at Abu Ghraib. So just shout it out.
Yes. Does this work?
Yes.
Clear as a bell, dude. Yes.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your talk, but I didn't hear that aspect in your economic evaluation. Did I miss it, or is that an additional aspect?
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Well, even like if we went in a business as usual case, there's a lot of costs that will be needed to replace existing infrastructure and to build new infrastructure. So the cost that I'm talking about, like the $100 billion for Colorado, a lot of that would be spent anyway in a business as usual case on something else. So it's It's exactly right. You're like in the electrification case, some things would be electrified even further, but if we didn't electrify, we'd be spending it on fossil fuels. But the difference is, for fossil fuels, you're spending continuously on fuel. I mean, every day you have to buy fuel for, buy fuel for electric generation, whereas when you have wind and solar, you don't need to buy fuel for electricity generation at all. So it's going to save a lot of money over time. Again, there's going to still be some upfront cost, but the cost savings are so enormous. We just have to look past, as a society, each individual is going to have to make their own decision, but as a society, we should be making decisions based on what's beneficial to everybody in the long term and the short term, including future generations.
Excellent. Who's next out there? I got somebody over here. Yes. And really project. Thank you so much.
Hi, I'm a Victim County Commissioner at the County Cities Aspen. And I want you to talk a little bit, if you would, about the environmental cost of batteries. Batteries are a big part of what you're projecting, and my understanding is that lithium-ion batteries are difficult to procure and have enormous effects on the local communities where they're mined and so on.
Okay, a great question. So I'm going to throw out some statistics here. So every year worldwide, there are 15 billion tons of fossil fuels mined, 15 billion tons. And every year worldwide, there are 1.6 million tons of all combination of rare earth elements, lithium, cobalt, and other precious metals. So that's like 1/10,000th the mining right now. If we electrified every single vehicle in the world, there are 1.5 billion vehicles. If we electrified every single one of them, that's 16 million tons of lithium is needed total. That's 1/1000th of the annual tons of fossil fuels mined every single year. But that lithium will, each car, let's say, last 20 years. Right now, 97 to 100% of lithium in batteries is recycled. So in 20 years, that same lithium will be used for another car. So over 100 years of using batteries, you're still going to use 16 million tons. Meanwhile, you would have used 15 billion tons times 100. So you'd use 100,000 times the mined fuel than lithium. In other words, the amount of lithium that you're going to need is trivial compared to the amount of fossil fuels that are mined. It's absolutely trivial. And you only need few mines, tens of mines. Meanwhile, you're going to need, every year, you're going to need, there's 50,000 in Central North America a year. Worldwide, we need hundreds of thousands of wells, oil and gas wells every year. You might need a few tens of lithium mines every year. So it's just like, it's just orders of magnitude different problem.
Awesome. We have time for one final rapid fire question, if you can promise to really project it.
Okay, I'll try. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, it's just too loud. No, that's perfect. Fire away.
All right, I'm Allie Richardson from Pikes Peak Permaculture, and I'm here representing Colorado Springs. I'm glad that you brought up the AI infrastructure. One thing that we teach in permaculture is to de-skill back. And with AI, and I'm not sure if a lot of people are familiar with the project that just came about, the Stargate project, is $500 billion towards infrastructure across the USA. Already $100 billion has been funded. And in Colorado Springs, we really have a high energy demand, which has caused rates to increase. Not enough wind and solar going in. And we also have no water on the Front Range where we are. Yet we have huge infrastructure coming in. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with it. You get onto any system that we have in technology right now, and you are just inundated. And there's all these trainings. So the more we use AI, how do you see that demand in the future? And how can we combat that with renewable if we just keep pushing this type of thing?
Well, it depends if you want to be connected to the grid or not connected. If you want to be independent of the grid, then it's a combination of either wind, solar, batteries, and hydrogen fuel cells can take it off grid, or geothermal electricity, enhanced geothermal, which you can do anywhere now. Like right now, there's a plant in Utah, enhanced geothermal, that's sending 300 megawatts to California by 2028. So off-grid, enhanced geothermal with wind, solar, and batteries and hydrogen fuel cells, or without the geothermal, you can just use wind and solar. Or you're connected to the grid and you just have wind and solar and batteries. In 2007, Google developed their first data center in North Dakota using wind connected to the grid. So wind would produce 100% of the electricity in the annual average, but when the wind wasn't blowing, you'd use grid electricity. So if you're connected to the grid, it's pretty easy. If you want to be off the grid, then you have to do a microgrid solution, which is one I just mentioned.
All righty, unfortunately, that's all the time we got. So give it a big one more time for Marc Jacobson, everybody.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you.